A lot of people who get involved in cowboy action shooting find that they save a lot of money by loading their own ammunition. In this video, I'm going to run through real quickly the steps required to reload 38 Special Cowboy ammunition. I'm going to be using a single stage press, which is the simplest type of bench mounted press. A lot of people already own these for reloading. You can also pick them up pretty inexpensively. The steps that we use to reload are the same regardless of the type of press. It's the dies that do the work. And this will just, again, be a quick video to show you the steps. So 38 Special is the most popular cartridge in cowboy action shooting, and I just have a handful of five fired 38 Special cases here that we're going to reload really quickly. So the first step is performed by this number one dies, a traditional 3-die set. Some dies come in 4s, but the number one die is a resizing and decapping die or depriming die. It has a little pin in the bottom that will punch the fired primer out of the case. It'll also squeeze the dimensions of the case back down to a minimum so that it will chamber in any firearm. So simply put the case into the shell holder at the top of the ram and just run the press. There's a little bit of resistance on this. 38 Special is not a high pressure cartridge, but there's a little bit of resistance, and as you might be able to see, it's popped out the old primer, and we'll just repeat that process for the other 4 cases. The problem with using a single stage press is just what you're seeing here. It requires me to handle the same cartridge case multiple times. If you're using a turret press, which has a single shell holder, single ram, but has the dies in a turret that you can rotate, that is faster. In a progressive press, like what you see on this side of the bench, the red press is the fastest, the most, but also the most complicated and expensive press. And there is a shell holder, a round rotating shell, shell plate that holds multiple cartridges, and multiple dies are also in the press, so it performs all these operations simultaneously. All right, so having resized all 5 of those, we're ready to go on to the next step, which is we can do one of 2 things next. We can prime the cases, reprime them, or we can expand the case next. So let's reprime first. It can be done really in either order. There is a little priming arm here on my press. I can put a primer into this little spring-loaded cup and lower the case onto it. A lot of people find that they don't like priming on the press. There are other ways, but you can do that. If you're getting by on a shoestring, you can start with priming on the press, but I use a handheld priming tool. This is an older Lee priming tool, which works really well. And simply, I've loaded the primers into this tray and oriented them, and you just squeeze and you get your new primer set in. You want the primer all the way to the bottom of the primer pocket, seated firmly at the bottom of the primer pocket, so that you don't have a situation where the primer's not all the way seated, and when you fire the gun, part of the energy of the firing pin is absorbed, by the primer being pushed forward in the case and likely to give you misfires. And you also obviously want to make sure that you don't have a high primer that's sticking up above the case head, which can cause the round to go off prematurely or tie up your gun. Neither one of those is good. So just as quickly there, really easy to prime these. But again, I'm handling the same cartridge case now, for the second time, or third time if you count putting it in and taking it out. Okay, so the next step is performed by the number 2 die, and this is a die that has a plug inside that will expand the mouth of the case to the correct dimension to hold a new bullet firmly. And it will also, if you dial it down a little bit further, it will bell or flare the mouth of the case, which is necessary when you're loading with lead bullets, which SAS rules require that we use lead bullets. And you can use that's a plain cast lead bullet, if you can see it, and it's has that little blue stripe you see is lubricant that's pressed into that groove. It's sort of a paraffin type, waxy type lubricant. You can also use in cowboy action shooting various types of coated bullets, and this is an example of a polymer coated bullet. You can use moly coated, powder coated, and those are fine, but not jacketed or plated or gas check bullets. So lead bullets are what we're using. And if you haven't flared your case mouth, it's possible that you would shave off some of the lead or some of the coating with a coated bullet as you were seating it. So what we do here is, well, I'll show you. If you tried to put a bullet into a sized case that hasn't had the neck expanded, these are bevel-based bullets, so it will actually sit in there a little bit, but it's really tight, and you want that to be opened up to the correct dimension. So, and I've already set these guys up, run through very little resistance on that stroke, but you want your bullet to be able to sit into the case a little bit, and there's enough leeway on that bell so that as I'm seating that bullet, it should not shave. And we'll just run each of those cases through that expander die. On some presses, this is done by the powder measure or powder measure funnel. With a single stage press, though, it is a separate die. All right, so it's 5 of those. Okay, well, now that we've primed our cases and expanded the necks to accept a new bullet, the next step is to charge the cases, which means to put powder or propellant into each of the cases. There are a number of ways you can do this. If you buy Lee reloading dies, and I have a set here, they give you a 1 scoop in the box. It's a yellow scoop with a little card that tells you of the various powders how much powder that scoop will dispense. Anytime you use a scoop or something like that, you want to verify the actual weight on a scale, but that'll get you started. Lee will also sell you a whole set of those scoops in various sizes, and again, a little card that tells you what of the different powders it will dispense. That's a good way. You can weigh individually each powder charge. That takes a long time and really not necessary for the type of shooting that we're doing, and the scoops actually give you pretty good repeatable accuracy. Another way to do it, what I'm doing here, is using a powder measure. So you see this green powder measure, it's almost sitting in the dark, sorry about the lighting. And I have set that measure to meter the amount of powder that I want. I'm not giving load data here, but I have verified this on a scale that it's given me the amount of powder that I want for this particular application. So I'll just run each case through the powder measure. And you see I'm handling each cartridge case again individually, picking it up and putting it down. That takes time. I mean, I'm only doing 5, but you imagine doing, 100 or 200, and we shoot 120 pistol rifle in a match. So, that's a lot of handling. It takes up a lot of time. All right. I'm using a loading block. It's a simple block here that I can put my cases in. And a good quality control or safety step is to verify the level of your powder before you seat a bullet. Now, what some people do is they will charge a case, do a visual, and then immediately put a bullet in it, seat the bullet. That's one way to do it. Another way with batch processing like this is to, as you charge your cases, set them into a block, and the block just keeps the cases from falling over and spilling powder everywhere. And then you can take a strong light, hold it under a strong light, or hold a flashlight over the cases and visually look down into the case and make sure that there's powder in each case and that the level of powder is appropriate. If you had thrown a double charge, you would be able to see it with a visual. Same thing if you had not put any powder in there or just a little bit, you can see the level of powder. That's important because a 38 special case, like a lot of cartridges that were developed during or just at the end of the black powder era, have a lot more case capacity than they need when they're loaded with modern smokeless powders, which are very dense and compact compared to black powder. So it is possible to not only double charge, but even triple or quadruple charge a 38 special case if you're using the fast burning powders that we tend to use for light loads and cowboy action shooting. I performed an experiment with tight group powder, which is very dense powder, and I was able to get 4 charges into a 38 special case. It was not overflowing the case. In fact, there was enough room. I could have seated a bullet on top of that quadruple charge. You would not want to fire that. So this is a good safety step. All right, so the next 2 steps are actually combined into this number 3 die, and that is seating the bullet to the proper depth and then crimping the case mouth. And you can adjust the length of your cartridge by the way you seat the bullet, and of course the bullet choice affects that as well. That's important, not to your revolver, which will eat anything as long as it doesn't stick out the end of the cylinder, but if you're using this ammo in a lever action rifle, some of them can be what I call picky eaters. They're real sensitive to the bullet shape in the cartridge and the overall length of the cartridge. And being able to adjust the depth of the bullet gives you flexibility to tune the load to something that will feed properly in your rifle. A traditional cast bullet like this, above that lube groove with the blue stripe, as you can actually see it, but there is another little groove below the top of the bullet. That is a crimp groove, and that is designed so that you can roll the edges of the case mouth into that groove to get a good tight grip on that bullet. So your bullet's held in place by neck tension, which is having the correct size of your case when you expand it, and the correct size of bullet, so that there'll be enough friction to hold the bullet steady, but also the crimp. And remember, we flared or belled the mouth of that case, and we got to take that flare out for sure. But in addition to taking the flare out and making the sides of the case mouth parallel, we actually want to roll. It's called a roll crimp because the die will actually fold the mouth of the case inward, and that will roll into the bullet. The crimp groove accommodates that to get you a good hold on there. Now, why is that important? On a heavy recoiling load shot in a revolver, that keeps your inertia from walking the bullets out of the cases. Not really a factor with cowboy action shooting, but what you do have is, well, better ignition, better consistency with a good bullet tension, neck tension, with a good crimp. But importantly, we load these cartridges into lever action, pump action rifles. They have tubular magazines, so you've got 10 cartridges in there, stacked up, nose to tail, under spring tension. And if you don't have good friction, good neck tension, good crimp, it can cause the cartridge to collapse. The bullet is pushed down into the cartridge case. That can increase your pressures. Not so much of a factor with the fairly low pressure loads we're using, but it can certainly tie up your rifle, and ruin your stage, ruin your day. So those, having a good crimp is important for that. Now, some modern bullets that we're seeing now don't have any grooves, especially ones that are designed to be coated, like the one I showed you a minute ago. And these bullets are still soft enough that you can crimp that case into the body of the bullet without any problem. So, all right, with that being said, and I've already set up this die to the correct setting. So what we'll do is put the charged case into the press, set a bullet on top. If it's a little bit cockeyed, the die will straighten it out, but you want it to be more or less straight. Because there's a lot of leverage in these presses, and if your bullet was tipped over too far, you're gonna crush your case, you're gonna deform your bullet, and you also wanna keep your fingers clear of this because there's enough leverage that you could give yourself a really hard pinch. Okay, so there we have a completed cartridge, and we'll just set it over here and repeat the process for the next 4 cartridges. So I've often said, if you can fry an egg or make a grilled cheese sandwich, you can make ammunition. It's not that complicated. You obviously need to be careful You need to get your load data from a reliable source like a loading manual or a website of a trusted source like that of a bullet or powder manufacturer. They publish a lot of that online now. So be careful about using load data that you got from some guy on the internet, some guy on YouTube. All right, so that's 5. That's a cylinder full, right? Because we shoot 5 rounds out of each revolver. After you've completed these, what I like to do is, before I box them up or bag them, I will do a quality control check. I'll do a visual, make sure, again, that my primer is seated properly, that the cartridge has not been bulged, that I haven't missed a cracked case. And the easy way to do that is you can buy cartridge gauges like these and drop them individually into there. But another quick way to do it is with a single action revolver, most of them, you can pop the cylinder out for cleaning and maintenance and whatnot. Just pop your cylinder out of your revolver, clean it, and this, you've got a free 6-chamber checker. You can drop your loaded cartridges in there, and if they, what we call the plunk test, if you drop it in, it goes plunk and falls all the way in, you know that your cartridge is the right dimensions. If you had one that was a little bulged, cracked case or whatever, you could find it here at the bench and not in the middle of your stage, right? So you cull it there, cull it here rather than there. So that's 5 cartridges made. If you were doing, 50, 100, 200, whatever, it's the same thing. You just do them in batches. And again, it takes longer than it would with a turret press or a single stage press, but the steps are the same. And if you understand each step, then you can run those more complicated presses and have a good understanding of what each stage of the process does. So I think that's everything for now, and we'll see you on the range.